I start with Amanda's story. Amanda would have been early 90s when I worked with Amanda. Amanda today would be in her 40s. I worked with her when she was 15. The question is that, what did I learn from working with many of the young people I work with? What did I learn from the parents of many of the parents I work with? Amanda was 15, have not been to school for 6 months. The principal of the Catholic school, I worked for the Catholic school for some 15 years. 7 years as a school counselor and 7 years as an outreach family therapist. So the principal sent me a referral. Paul Mende knows me, knows my work. He said, how can you help this family? And at that time I was very busy. And I can only offer them one appointment, home visit of 2 hours. So I go to the home and I listen to their stories. I listen to all aspects of their stories, why Amanda doesn't go to school. And I would interview the family for a good hour. Then I stop and give myself some space to think about the last hour of my interview. Then I interview for another hour. Then I give myself some space to look at what would I say to the family at the end of the interview. What would be my prescriptive message to the family about how I understand why Amanda does not go to school. Amanda have a sister who's 16 years old, was moving to another Catholic high school. In the Catholic high school in Australia or Sydney, it's not uncommon that you go from year 7 to year 10. Year 11, year 12, which is HSC years, is another Catholic high school. So Amanda's sister had to go to another high school. And Amanda had a number of medical issues. Her hips was a bit funny when she was born, so she had to have multiple uncertainties of surgery. She also fractured her arm, which means that she gave up her favorite sports. Her best friend moved on to another school, and this was the context of Amanda. Amanda at the same time was very worried about her parents' unhappiness. I'll get back to Amanda's story later. So in terms of school refusal, I think Dr. Lai has covered a fair bit of this. The definition is that reluctance or refusal to attend school often leading to prolonged absence. Sometimes it's very insidious. It's just for, one day doesn't go to school. And over time it adds up. So that will be one. The child is usually at home with the blessing of the parents. No, the parents are aware they are at home. That's why it's very different from truancy. Emotional upset at the prospect of attending school, which may reflect in excessive fearfulness, temper tantrums, unhappiness, or possibly in the form of unexplained physical symptoms. So somatic complaints such as headaches are very common presentation. So I tend to reframe that the child is very sick. And the idea of being very sick is that when you get really, really very sick, you do become physically sick. So remember, you can never discount their headaches. Always agree and accept the headaches. And then treat them symptomatically. Give them 2 Panadols. Give the school permission to give out the Panadols. Then you don't get into a power struggle. You just say, I'm really sick, and say, no, you're not sick, you just don't want to go to school. It's pointless. You don't get mileage from that. It's better to acknowledge and treat the symptoms. It's an important consideration. Many therapists got it wrong when they say that the child is ODD, when it becomes defiant and oppositional. But you understand school refusal from a context of heightened anxiety. When anxiety is heightened, it's because they have no control. So it's not uncommon they manifest into pure aggressive behavior, pure defiance behavior, and it's mistaken diagnosis of ODD. But when the school refusal is not a problem, you don't have any ODD, trust me. It's just that moment of loss of control and wanting to have that kind of control back that contribute to that predicament. There's an absence of antisocial behavior. So it's not their conduct disorder, so that's not the case. And generally, parental efforts, parents try some effort to get them to school. They just gave up. And not uncommon, the child will make a lot of empty promises. I'll go to school tomorrow. And the parents will lighten up. Oh yeah, it'll be better tomorrow. Come tomorrow is a disappointment. Come to tomorrow is another disappointment. So you can appreciate the parental feeling of wits ends and being overwhelmed. It's a very common presentation. By the time the parents come to me, they're overwhelmed. They're exhausted. They have enough. They are getting tired. And it's not uncommon, they then become very frustrated with the child. They get angry with the child. And guess what happens? The child then develops guilt, which is unhelpful. So you can appreciate the dynamics of contribution to that. Next slide, please. What are the stats? Prevalence rates are similar across genders and tends to be common in children around 5 years to 10 years. However, most of my client base are adolescents. The 13, 14s, 15 and 16s are mostly my client base. I don't work with too many children. I do. I have twin boys, 7 years, 6. So I work with all ages, but the clients that I work a lot more tend to be adolescents in the 14 or 15 age group. The question then, how does COVID-19 fit into all this? And you can appreciate how much MCO has contributed significantly to the escalation of anxiety across, and school refusal and not being to school for a while can contribute to feeling a bit alien, Next. Special considerations, comorbidity to school refusal. School refusal are known for different names. School phobia, separation anxiety, generalized anxiety, and not uncommon OCD is a comorbidity, right? So it's very common. But underneath all, it's really an anxiety-based issue, particularly in the terms of separation anxiety. Threats of suicide are not uncommon. Just imagine, when you lose control, you say anything to have some control. So the fact that they threaten suicide at that point will contribute to a lot of therapists taking the necessary step to make it workable. Because they're worried, the child might die, so they back off. So the threats of suicide may just be an expression of control as well. And so it's important to really assess the child. But when they do talk about suicide, then you really have to assess the risk of suicide. So you still take them at face value and not discount that. So it's important to do a good risk assessment, and we don't have time to cover that. Gaming addiction is secondary to family dysfunction, and gaming addiction, how often is a way of coping to their unhappiness. Yeah, it's a good distraction. They don't have to think about going to school until tomorrow, So gaming addiction is a big problem in the 21st century. You look around you, you go Yamcha, everybody have their own phone, nobody talks anymore, I now prescribe family time in my work. I now prescribe family time in my work with families. Next. So the idea of that, there's only two methods of getting a child back to school. They talk about early full-time or early part-time. Early full-time is very commonly known as a flooding technique, which is very traumatic. Can be seen to be very traumatic. As Dr. Lai says, do we further traumatize a kid if we were to go for the works, which is a flooding technique? Because it's terrible to watch. They scream, they yell, they run away, they do all sorts of things. They damage stuff. So it's a very scary experience of having a child that when you go for early return, because they do everything to not do that. But one important thing about school refusal is that they know they belong to school. So that's a taken. The kids who refuse to go know that they should be at school. They just don't know how to get back to school. That's a very important distinction. But half the time they know, they want to go back to school, but they don't know how to go back to school anymore. Okay? And I think that's the part where in terms of the further down the track, when you look at your approach, a directive approach will get a better outcome. Okay. Early part-time increases that you go like a tortoise. Go for 1 period, go for 2 periods. And Mendel was like that. She was dry retching in the morning when I was there at their home. She was dry retching, she was sick, she was really genuinely sick. And it's very scary to look. For parents, it's very scary to look, you know. And she was complaining, headaches and everything. So the accessibility of a therapist is very important, yeah. So early part-time increase, I've done 2 methods, okay? But let's look at the next slide. What does the methods tell you? Early return interferes with therapy process because young people is prevented from solving internal emotional conflicts. So when you go for the fast method, then you might miss doing the therapy work that's essential to help them to make sense of that. You just go for the works, right? So you don't have that. Clinicians' failure to insist early rapid return fits on the neurotic patterns within the family. So we can possibly get contaminated by the family's anxiety. And how do we stay away from that? Many provoke escalation of anxiety and panic attacks and concerns for traumatic experiences, Dr. Lai brings to attention. The concern that you might give them another diagnosis of PTSD. So doing your due diligence to assess the history of their mental health is a very critical component of your assessment, a holistic assessment that covers all bases. You can do your best, okay? A part-time approach may help circumvent treatment dropout. However, lower attendance at the start of treatment was significantly related to poorer treatment outcomes. So you go for the slow method, failure is higher. You go for the fast method, you're looking at 72% outcome. If you get an outcome from going by doing school refusal, you got a 50% outcome, you've done well. But the fast method does predict a much higher outcome of up to. This was a research in Japan, where the child refused therapy, and was purely the parents and the school working together to get the child back to school. And they get a 72% outcome without therapists. In my personal experience, I've done both. I have success on both, but the rapid outcome is quicker. You can get an outcome from rapid outcome within 48 hours by attending 1 or 2 days of school, and it becomes normal. I generally say to the parents, prepare for better for 2 weeks. If you can prepare for better for 2 weeks, and you do a rapid outcome, and then you're more likely to be able to maintain. School refusing adults have poorer outcomes relative to school refusing children. That's obvious. How do you carry a 16-year-old to school? You can't. But you can carry a 5-year-old or 7-year-old to school, right? Let me tell you though, a lot of the adolescents might struggle, and you think they're big, but the construct that I played with them was that I know they want to go to school. I played with that construct. So the way they resist you tells you that they actually want to go to school. So for example, I have a boy, let's call him Mitch. Mitch have a father that's a big man. And Mitch himself is a big boy. So you can't really physically carry him. But I notice when I do the house visit, I do house visit for school refusal for a simple reason. I want to look at the family dynamics in vivo, live. And when the mother used a firm voice, Mitch responded. When the mother used a soft voice, Mitch will resist more. So that's why the presence of a therapist as a coach in the early stage of initial reintegration is critical, right? And then when you age him to the car, he's kind of like, he could fall on the floor and you can't do a thing, but he'll still walk the walk. But take you a bit longer to get him to the car. And when you eventually get into the car, I was at the back seat with the car, the mother was driving, the father was next to him, and we arrived at the school, and the system is all in place. The school council was already waiting for him, because we'll make a phone call, we're on the way now. And that was all been set up. And what happened when we reached the school, he hyperventilated. He had a full-blown panic attack. The school counselor just took over. Know what to do. Now look at me. Take a deep breath now. Within 15 minutes, and we just excuse ourselves. So once you take them to school, the stakeholders like us who take it must excuse and let the school manage. So this is very important step. If you stay there, the odds of him coming home is high. But if you let the school manage, the odds of him staying there is higher. Okay? So next. In Australia, I'm not sure about, I think Fong have the idea too. I think it's legally mandated. Parents have to send their kids to school. Right? And if they don't send their kids to school, they can be taken to court. And I have a couple of cases of that. But because the parents are under therapy, the court doesn't do too much to punish the parents. Okay, that's very important. That's why getting therapy and getting mental health and getting child psychiatrists involved is very important. Okay, because you do require that. The second clinical implications is poor academic outcomes. Underachieving or failure, dropping out of school, poor employment prospect. I worked with a 16-year-old boy, 16 hours of technology use. How the hell is he going to go to school if he doesn't have a normal sleep pattern, right? Eat at the computer. Eyesight problems, well, how much he stare at the monitor, the shoulder is hunched. I failed with that one. Couldn't get in because most of technology addiction, they're not customers. The parents are the customers. And I think it's sad because you end up dropping out of school. So a percentage of school refusal will drop out of school. It's a sad predicament. Peer relationship problems interfere with child social and educational employment, development. Not uncommon, a lot of therapists do the wrong thing and advocate homeschooling. You have to really diligently assess that homeschooling or correspondence is the way to go. Because when you do that, guess what? They suffer from social and peer relationship issues. And 6 months later, they come back to me, I now want to go back to school. So I never endorse a homeschooling arrangement unless I've exhausted all my psychological intervention. I want to do the work first before I do that. So I don't generally recommend that, but a percentage can be helpful, like Dr. Lai's case. Then I was involved in that one. Problematic family functioning is also not an uncommon presentation. Yeah? Next. This is how I would do my assessment. The presenting problem is very important for me. What brought them to therapy? How long has it been a problem? What is the family development history? So I look at the child, I look at the pregnancy, I look at how was it decided that they should have a child or not have a child. I look at any issues of separation anxiety when they were 3 years old, when they go to preschool for the first time. I look at any mental health history in the family system, okay? I look at any events that are significant. So I would do a full family developmental history through the 3-generational family network called the multi-generational framework. So I like to look at the family within the 3 generations in the context of what are the previous unresolved issues in both sides of the family. So very often I will ask the parents, what would you like at his age? And they tell a lot of stories about there might be issues for them who are parents having issues around separation, because it's not uncommon that school refusal is an intergenerational transmission across generations. I look at the family of origin, the parents, how much the parents have differentiated from their own parents. So when I talk about differentiation, we talk about Murray Bowen's work on the process of differentiation. How much have they become independent adults? I like to assess the school system. If I were to intervene at the school, I want to know what the school is made of. So I will interview the parents. Tell me about the school. Tell me who are you close to in the school. Tell me who in the school that can help me to help you. I like to interview that. And when I interview the child, I also interview the teachers. Tell me which teacher you can't stand. Tell me who are the teachers you like. And because I'm looking for resources in the school system that can help me to help the child. And I want to know, are they going to provide what is required to get a child back to school? Is there a system in place that when we arrive, they're going to take over? I want to know all that. And so I take a one-down position when I enter the school. I take it, what can I do to be helpful? How can we be collaborative? And more importantly, teachers need help. Teachers are lacking in mental health knowledge, so they need help. So I don't find many schools that will say no to me. Most schools are actually quite collaborative, you know. So I'll just put my hand out, I said, tell me. And I always have fun with the schools. And when I start the meeting, I normally have the child, the parents, and the key people in the school is that I want somebody that have authority. They can rubber stamp what I suggest, that they believe is going to work. I want the school counselor involved to support the child when he's at school. The year coordinator is involved, is not uncommon because they're connected to all the teachers. So there's a thing we'll talk more about that part. So I want to assess the school system. And I've been very privileged to have spent 15 years learning from a Catholic school. And previously in my work as a senior manager for tertiary service, I've been very involved in schools for many, many years. Peer relationship and academic history, I like to have an idea how much of the learning has been a problem. Not uncommon if they haven't been to school for a while. They develop anxiety-provoking situations around academic pressure, even though they are bright. Dr. Lai said they are generally bright, and I agree. But they're still worried about school because they haven't been to school for a while, especially if they haven't been to school for 6 to 12 months, you know. And they might, and they can, it's not uncommon that they'll catch up with the work. So I never worried about that part because I know that you cannot not learn if you're at school every day. You cannot not learn if you're at school every day. So it's never been an issue for me. In fact, more of an issue for the child who's bright, will still want to do the assessment, you know, because they are academically bright. So I like to also assess the peer relationship. You see a positive cohort of kids in the school that can help me to help the child. I tell you Jordan's story. Jordan, year 9 too. I can get him to the school office, but I can't get him to the classroom, despite my best effort. And Jordan had 2 best friends. And so one day I said, Jordan, will you allow me to get your best friend to help you get back to class? He says, no, David, no. But that's just school worry germs talking. So one day I asked his mother to access the best friend, get the deputy principal to give permission to talk to the best friend, and get the permission from the best friend's parents who said that's okay. And I just surprised Jordan. We walked into his office. Oh, he had a state of shock. But immediately he felt good. It's no longer a secret that I have a school refusal problem. Right? He actually felt relief. And he was happy. So sometimes what worry germs tell them is so wrong. You know? The second day, I had a second best friend. So I walked in with 2 best friends. And we walked into the office again and he had another shock. But he started to feel a bit relaxed. Right? And then because the mother works in the school, I then do the exposure work after school. The mother took him to the classroom and graduate exposure work and began to feel that today he might be actually the last year of a university degree in engineering. You know? And there was a lot of family stuff that caused him problems. I like to look for competence in the child. When I talk about competence, competence degree, what they're good at. Let me tell you Zach's story. Zach have learning difficulties, low average IQ, have 5 diagnoses: ADHD, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD, yeah, and learning difficulties. You know what is Zach? So I can look at the 5 diagnoses, but doesn't get me very far. Or I can look at, hey, Zach loves waveboard jumping, and he has never been on competition. And he started going on competition, and he got 3 gold medals. So when I have a case conference at school, I said to the teachers and the deputy, I said, do you know this guy? He's a waveboard jumping, and he's never been on competition, and he got 3 gold medals. I said, if he can do that, I and you can't do that. If he can do that, he can do anything. How can the therapist borrow his belief to the child that they believe that they can do it? It's the key point. So when I finished my work with Zach, I said, Zach, can you tell me what part of my work was really helpful? He says, David, I believe in me. All right? So that was very important that the kid could internalize something like that. And that's Ian. Ian has severe ADHD. He was in year 8. He's also got low average IQ. He was very aggressive, threw chairs and tables in the classroom. And I was asked to help him. So I went to the home and do a home visit, and I asked the story, you know. I said, Ian, how can I help you, you know? And Ian over time was engaged. And one of the things that he said to me, I said to him, Ian, we'll get there together, was my statement for him. At the end of every therapy session, I said, Ian, we'll get there together. I worked with Ian for 3 school terms, got him tested, got his learning needs met and all that. And at the end of the therapy, Ian's mother was so proud that the son actually finished year 10. And said, my son finished year 10. The proud mother said, will you come to the school and say goodbye to him? So I went to the school, and Ian gave the school principal a clock. Very interesting how children internalize stuff. A clock symbolizes time, right? How much time you spend with me, right? And he gave a big clock to the special educator who spent a lot of time to help him to get back to his learning. Ian gave me a set of pens. But the most meaningful part of what Ian gives me was the card. And it wrote, we got there together. So you see, so this is evidence coming from a client, not coming from me, you know. So that was Ian's story. So competence can be anything. I worked with another severely ODD, ADHD boy, and his competence was lightings, you know, lightings. And the teachers hated him. He was a pain in the neck. You know what ODD kids are like? They're a pain in the neck. And guess what? He loves lightings. So I advocated for him. I said to the teacher, can you give him a leadership role? It's a joke, isn't it? Such a troublesome boy. And you can ask for leadership. I now changed my tone. Can you give him something that he can be involved in the school community? It's a bit more digestible. But anyway, they agree. And they give him the chapel. So every Friday, Ian put out lightings in the chapel. And they can't do without him. They miss him when he's take a day off sick. And Ian not only do that, he actually showed leadership abilities by recruiting other troubled young kids to put up lightings. So you see, when you focus on competence, there's a lot more light in the tunnel when you work with kids like this, because they have enough of people telling them what they can't do. And one of the biggest problems is the self-esteem. Pervasive sense of poor self-esteem is worse than depression. So you have to be very careful with some of this. Looking for resources. So I look for grandparents that can help me. Amelia's story. Amelia didn't go to school for a while. Severe separation anxiety. To cut the long story short, we did the flooding technique. The father try the flooding technique by himself but failed miserably because he didn't have a system in place. The mother was an assistant principal, the father was a businessman in charge of disability services. And they were desperate. They were desperate to get their daughter back to school. And they loved their daughter. But severe separation anxiety. And Amelia, what was interesting about Amelia was that she actually had this sense of resolute that I like about her, you know. So her most common thing is this anxiety-provoking situations, which is very common. Sense of awkwardness, of going back to school, sense of embarrassment, which Dr. Lai has covered in terms of that. And one thing about Amelia with the separation anxiety was that we actually did the flooding technique. So I was present at the home, and we do the normal stuff, pull the blankets off. She resisted. We then get her up, and she never resisted in the sense that you just sit on the floor and you carry her. You can't carry her, right? She was still able to edge her along and get her to the car. And I was there, I was very directive. I get the school bags ready, a pair of shoes ready, a uniform set of clothes in the car. So she knew all that. This was already in place in the car waiting. So we are not mucking around, we are actually going to be carrying you to school kind of thing. In the car, she threatened to kill herself. Look, I'm going to pay them. And then the father was panicked. I said, look, I'm going to ring the police and all that, threats. So I said, I was very relaxed. Okay, ring the police when you get to the school. And when we arrived at the school, the system was in place. The room was in place for her to have privacy. We went after the school bell has gone. So we have to be very strategic in how you intervene and make sure that you cover as much spaces as possible in terms of anxiety-provoking situations. We hand it over and we excused it. Our father started to tear. Right? The father started to tear. And within less than half an hour, she got herself together. And after school, she told her parents how nice school was for the last 6 hours. Right? And I asked the father about the tears. And the father talked about his experience of how he was feeling so inadequate when the child was born and was so full of problems, you know, and stuff like that. Intrauterine trauma. And so you can appreciate how much the mother would have been so anxious. And you try to be a bit more playful and use fantasies in therapy. How much would Amelia have caught worry germs even before she's born? And giving her that narrative, the parents that narrative, was connecting the dots that maybe that my daughter was already anxious even before she's born. And some of the stresses bring all this trauma back, you know? So resources, grandparents are very important. With Amelia, I asked the grandfather to be involved because I need more than one person. The father, if I cannot be there all the time, I'm unnatural. I want to naturalize the family as soon as possible. So I want to mobilize whatever resources I get. So I asked the father, will you ask the father to help? The father came, right? And the father came, and the mother didn't think that is going to work. She said, I think it's not going to work. But the fact that I said you think that it didn't work, it worked because Amelia go to school without the grandfather. Okay, so next. And this is a prescriptive message to Amanda. I want you to appreciate that how to normalize stress. Look at school refusal as from a stress model. It's much more liberating from looking at school refusal from a psychopathology model and generalized anxiety. So next. Oh, it's a bit short, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to read for you. So I saw the family for 2.5 hours. And I got my head together. This is a message I give to Amanda's parents. As discussed, Amanda, we responded to the school's concern in regards to Amanda not attending school. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for all your honesty and openness to talking about some very difficult issues. I would like to share my opinion with the family. Given all the stresses Amanda has gone through in the past few years, it is no wonder she is not attending school. Any stress is enough to cause difficulties. However, Amanda has all this. Been bullied when she was in year 7, as well as losing her close friend Marie. Lost her sister as a maid and protector when she changed school. Experienced significant medical challenges and disruption. ongoing vomiting, accident at school where she fractured her arm, surgery to her hip, and the uncertainties that she may need further surgery. Her loss of her favorite sport. I am to be puzzled as to why Deborah is the mother, that you tell your kids that the father has an affair many years ago. Nevertheless, I would like Amanda and Judy to know this is adult business, and that mom and dad need to sort out themselves. Given that the pediatrician has diagnosed Amanda with a weak stomach, I believe that any further referral to any specialist about her vomiting would not be helpful. I'm unsure, as Amanda is extremely sensitive and in tune with mom's needs. I wonder how much of Amanda not going to school is a way of looking after mom. I'm unsure to where Amanda got the idea of correspondence school. She was saying things about going to correspondence school. I believe it's too early at this stage to decide on correspondence schooling. In fact, I would like Amanda to start entertaining the idea what would be like to go back to school again, for her to record her, and also for her to record her inner thoughts and worries in her journal. Amanda would not go to school this week. That's a paradox. However, she should start school slowly and gradually the following week. As for you, Deborah, you have been working very hard looking after Amanda. It's taken a toll on you. It's time for you to have a rest. I would like George to take a more active role to take Amanda to school. Amanda, it would be helpful if Judy can be a friend to Amanda again. So I can appreciate from that short paragraph, there's been multiple interventions, multiple strategic interventions to deal with the family dynamic, to look at the power, to look at the structure. And I delivered this, and guess what was the outcome? She went to school for the first time for one period. One period, not more, not less. Took me 3 or 4 school terms to get overtime to get back to school. And then I offered Amanda this. I said, Amanda, can I talk to you by yourself? Guess what she said to me? No, I'm not comfortable talking to you by yourself. You know? You give the child a lot of power to say no to you. I said, how about phone call? Yes, I can talk on the phone. So I do individual therapy with Amanda by phone. And after every session, I put together a therapeutic card and send it to her what we talk about. And that's how I got Amanda back to school. You do require to be innovative in how you work with school refusals. You know, things like that. Recently, I picked up a boy who also has severe separation anxiety and doesn't want to go to school. I recruited the mother as a co-therapist. And I asked the mother to do therapy work with the child by giving her certain homework to do. And I said, these are my thoughts, you know, with the boy. I sent her an email about how I make sense of it. And I said, correct me which part is not right, which part is wrong, which part is right. And she would say it to the mother. And then I asked the mother to do some therapeutic work with me by doing the bubble. You know a bubble, the dream bubble? I said, this is you. And this boy is John. John's like you, have parents like you, have same problems like you. What are John's worries? Draw a picture about John's worries. So I recruited the mother to be a co-therapist. But not all mothers are suitable, so you just have to check it out and research it and make sure that you are able to do the things that you can do with some of the parents, you know. I mean, they are really rich resource, you know. So next. What are the common themes that emerge in school refusal? Embarrassment and awkwardness is a very common presentation. Okay? Structural issues, power and control, boundary and enmeshment are very common themes. Avoidance, they are expert. I call them, they're very sophisticated to avoid schoolwork. They're very sophisticated. They do everything to avoid schoolwork. And it can cause secondary problems of poor self-esteem and then makes it worse, right? So every time you try to mention homework, it escalates. Disengaging from learning is very common. Beware of empty promises. Worried sick. So I construe the not going to school as worried sick. And I have a brain in my office. And I would say, How is worry germs running your life? So I externalize not going to school as worry germs running their life. So I do that. And because it's a very powerful way of them not looking at themselves badly. It's just worry germs running my life. You give them some control by saying, how can you beat worry germs? How can I help you to conquer worry germs? You know? Parents are at the wit's end and overwhelming is a common theme. Frustration, anger, and desperation. The risk of making the child feeling guilty is very, very important. So helping the parents to not get into too much power struggle, you know, make a statement and walk off. Make a statement and walk off. I don't like that when you talk to me this way, and walk off. So how you parent a child during this period is very important. Then I look at who are the worriers in the family. So generally not uncommon, the mother is a worrier, the mother carried the worry germs from her own mother, and then her sisters are worriers. So I look at how worry gets transmitted across generations. Okay? Sense of hopelessness, parents feel hopeless. That's another common theme. They're overprotective as well. So you try to do more, they're actually overprotective. So it's very important to assess both parents' psychopathology, especially when one is more troublesome. And I learned another failure, where a mother actually dissociated in the school because of the stress, because I didn't give quick enough individual attention to her. I did suggest individual therapy, and she was in the process of it, but it was not quick enough to support her mental anguish about some of the challenges, because it's quite demanding. The work of getting a child back to school is very demanding. And then the interactional patterns, I like to do house visit and to look for it, to look at the reenactment in front of my eyes to better appreciate and understand dynamics. Next slide, please. So family dynamic, role boundaries and hierarchy becomes blurred. The child becomes the boss in the family. How can a 15-year-old be in charge of the family? Not possible. But they're very powerful. A parentified child. A child gets triangulated in the marital relationship. So a child's problems of not going to school is they're worried about their parents' unhappiness. So how to deal with that? I will always make it explicit. How much are you worried about your parents now? How long have you been worried about mom and dad? Would you allow me to support mom and dad so that you can think about what you should do yourself? So you do the boundary stuff and you do the support stuff. So you might do some subsystem work for individual work. You might do some subsystem work for couples work. It's also not uncommon the peripheral or absent fathers. Father get mobilized out of the picture through the dynamic. Most likely, most of the time, are absent fathers. Because it's not uncommon the mother-child relationship become far too close. To an extent that sometimes mothers say it's suffocating. And it's a relief when you intervene. Oh, this is a relief. She goes to school for the first time, you know. So I'm always curious about the emotionality or anxiety in the family system. Don't lose sight that the normal sibling suffers. So always think about, ask questions about the normal sibling. What's that like for you? Are you missing out? Because mom has to give so much attention to your sister. Important elements, yeah. Child developmentally arrested, overprotective. So if you have a teenager who is 15 and they're still treated like a 10-year-old, then they haven't really differentiated. So Murray Bowen's work on differentiation is a very important model to consider using. So the idea of how is school refusal enabled by the family system at times is a part of your assessment. Okay? Next slide, please. We've done this one already. Next. How I use language and words. Language and words are very powerful. It allows you to amplify the issue. Okay? So I look at, contagious. Worry germs are very contagious. The same as, you know, if you have read Michael Yapko's work on depression. Depression is highly contagious. There's a book on that. Sensitiveness, not uncommon. The identified child is very sensitive to the unhappiness in the family system. Hiccups, prepare them for hiccups. Oh dear, I forgot to tell you. I have to apologize to you. I forgot to tell you that this sometimes happens, having hiccups. Hiccups is not like, in a way, it's like some form of failure. Mother, how long have you been a mother to your own mother? A boundary, responsibility, roles. Or how much have you become a therapist to your own mother? Mother, so you amplify that. I think using words and language allow you to amplify some of the issues in the family system. A house of many islands. Absent father is an island. So how do you align the father relationship back to the system to have a responsibility? Because your wife is too tired. I need you to help me. I need your wife to have a break. So you give the rationale. When you look at Amanda's message, that was how I was saying, how much of you staying at home is a way of looking after mom, Worry germs, worries. Okay, next slide, please. Therapist toolkits. This is our research. Therapist presence, confidence, and accessibility is a predictor of success. The self of a therapist is how you use you. So I tend to use me a lot when I work with ADD kids. I fail maths and I don't like school. So a lot of ADD kids have issues like this. So they can I can identify with them, and at the same time they can appreciate that, oh, well, you have learning struggle too. So how much do you use your? Newton talks about the multiple self. If you're a doctor, you can have a head of a doctor, So how you use yourself, how authentic are you? How genuine are you? How do the kids know that you care about them? That is the most critical part of the self of a therapist. Okay. Embrace a coaching role. So my phone is free in the morning on the week of integration. So the parents know that they can call me, because the high risk time is first thing in the morning when they get them up and when they're on the way to school. So the parents know that they can call me and I'll take on the coaching role. Otherwise, I'm at the home to help them to go to school. Not every child, I need to go to the home to help them. But with Amelia's story, I went for 2 days. That's all I did. I went for 2 days and she integrated successfully after that. The father was able to be strong enough to take her back to school. So integrate strategically, align the subsystem, calm the system. The therapist's role must be able to calm the system, calm the mother's system, the father's system, especially when they have co-parenting issue. How to help them to agree to disagree, but be on the same page when it comes to managing her going back to school. So I will always ask the question, do I have you guys on my side? I don't muck around, because it's hard work and it's very labor intensive. So I want the outcome. I say I want to get an outcome for you, but are you both on the same side as me? Okay. So being a very directive therapist are important. Be a good storyteller. Tell multiple stories to connect the child to your other experiences or other young people that have got better. Mobilize support and trust the therapeutic process. What you do today may have some reference later, not straight away. Trust the therapeutic process. Next slide, please. Address structure issues, we talk about that. Prepare parents for battle. So prepare them for the hard work. Evaluate constantly. So the use of solution-focused scaling questions are very important. One is that nothing has changed, then it's got better. Where are you today? It's very concrete in terms of measuring success. Normalize life stress, which I've talked about. Focus on action-orientated activities. Essentially, don't have too much dialogue when you try to get a kid to school. They will talk you out. They'll talk the parents out. So I always keep it nice and tight. Off to school now, bags together, let's get going, that kind of dialogue. Don't get into too much dialogue. They get you all distracted from the important part of getting them back to school. School meeting, case conference as soon as possible. Normally I see a family first time for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I would organize a case conference within a week. I would want them to get back to school the following week. And I would always allow the child to have some self-determination. How would you like to go back to school? Because by then you deal with the structural issues and you start to make make the what is implicit explicit, that the adults are in charge, not the child. Okay, through all your intervention. Early intervention is critical, and define the role of the stakeholders. Are you a bad cop or a good cop? So as a therapist, sometimes I can be seen as a bad cop. So I want to know that are the father a bad cop or the mother a bad cop? So the father sometimes might be a bad cop. And then when it comes to the school, is the deputy principal a bad cop or a good cop? So I define the roles about who is going to take on those roles. To gain again further, it's a structural maneuver, okay, and make it explicit. And these are two books that Dr. Lai has shown. One was The School Wobblies. That's a fantastic book, The School Wobblies. It's written by a child psychiatrist, two psychiatrists. The adult psychiatrist was able to put cartoons together, and the child psychiatrist put the words. That book itself will tell you everything about school refusal. It's very, very psychoeducative. So psychoeducation must be part and parcel of the whole intervention. And the other one is how to beat worry wards. Next slide, please. What can the school climate research tells me? Next slide. So the Ackerman project, Nathan Ackerman is a prominent pioneer of family therapy, and he identified a couple of challenges that for going to school is that there's no established procedures for problem solving and information sharing between home and school. And I think that is a problem back in the early 80s. And I think here is probably the same as well. Cultural, racial, and economic differences between school personnel and families often create difficulties in effective communication. What I get here is that a lot of parents have issues with school, and the school have issues with the parents, so they blame each other. They blame each other, so there's no trust. So I take on a bit of a gray area. So I take on a bit of a mediator's role, and I always focus on the child. What can we do to get her back to school? Not what the parents, but about the school, but the child. Focus on the child when you have that. So I always say to them, I tread a gray area today, and I try to just marry the system to be on the same page as much as possible. So if there's a huge problem between the parents and the school, then I will have the first meeting without the child. Otherwise, I always have the child present in the meeting, because the child have to deal with the fact that what is discussed is going to be implemented. So they have to be part and parcel of that. A lot of school management plan, children are not involved. And that's a sad predicament, that we don't allow voice to the child to have some say in how the program should be. Parents are seldom viewed as partners or co-decision makers by the school. So there's an inherent concern that the parents will take over. But that's been not my experience. Every time I'm involved, I only have very small percentage where the parents blame the school blame the parents, etc. When I take on the mediator's role. Okay. Next. So what makes it work? That you have a shared concern, that we have a shared project. Clear policy, a team approach. We require leadership. I tend to take on the case worker's role by putting together the management plan from a discussion, things like that. Links with key personnel, so whoever is important, the stakeholders, the school counselor, the roles are clear and the responsibilities are all ruled up. Communication channel, email is the best. Reply all, everybody get the same message. Send it to everybody, everybody know what's happening. And that's the quickest and the most efficient form of communication, because you can't really talk to each other a lot. But the school knows that I'm very accessible. A clear, defined plan that's proactive, individualized, and inclusive. Giving voice to the child and adolescent. You know how I give voice to a child? There's a boy who's 8 years old. ADHD, ODD, get into fights, got suspended. Clearly very, very unhappy. I said, why are you unhappy? Oh, do you think that I'm the one that got punished, David? Do you think those kids that call me names ever got punished? I'm the one that sits in the corner and have all the negative attention from all the students walking past me. This is an 8-year-old saying that to me. So I have a meeting with the principal, and I said to the boy, I said, would you like to tell the principal what's that like for you? You just open up and tell it as it is. I said, do you think those kids that call me names have ever been punished? And the principal's response was, they have been punished, but not to the same extent as you. So at least he got some reply from an adult. The same thing as when you give voice to a child in the family. They tell you as it is. It's very important to give voice to a child and appreciate that they can be competent children. They tell it, they're honest, you know. Advocacy and respectful intervention. It's a sad predicament that lots of therapists don't take on the advocacy role. They don't see that to be their job. But when you work with clients like school refusal and ADHD, it's not possible because they're more likely to be bullied. You know that ADHD children are more likely to be bullied in the literature? They're more likely to cop it. They're more likely to have a hard time at school, you know? The research on ADHD in Australia is they go around the whole of Australia and survey 1,000 parents. And the survey comes up that the school fail ADHD children. So that's a sad predicament, you know. And what they're asking, they're not asking for individualized support, they're asking for accommodation. How can we accommodate an ADHD child's busy legs? You know, have a table that you can stand up and do work. You can walk to the table and do work. Allow the child to have busy legs, you find that you can manage them a bit better. You know, a lot better. Okay, next. Oh. You sleeping, are you? Okay, so in terms of school climate, it's really about how schools are connected. It's a predictor of positive outcomes. If the school is connected to the family, then the odds are good. If the school and the parents are talking more, then that's a good thing, okay? It's a powerful predictor of health, good outcomes. Next. This particular journal, Australian Journal of Guidance and Counselling, a whole journal is dedicated to working with schools. It's a very old journal in 2015, but this whole journal is dedicated to school. It looks at collaborative process, it looks at student focus and things like that. So, next slide. You'll get my PowerPoint, so don't worry about missing out. Oh, this is done, this is already finished. Next, I have a double slides. Okay, this is a video clip about Zach's story. Zach actually had 5 diagnoses. I'm going to watch this. I'll show it to you afterwards. Next. Okay, so then you have to look at, based on your assessment, how are you going to put together an individualized management plan? So the first one is that what are the universal principles? So the themes of awkwardness, the theme of embarrassment are what I call awkwardness, avoidance, and somatic complaints. So all teachers should be aware. So I get the school year coordinator, press a button, it goes to all the teachers. Please don't bring attention to this boy when he comes to school. Allow him to sneak in like a turtle. Right? Everybody knows it, nobody brings attention. Okay? So, rationale, what are the recent events that exacerbate school refusal? Fall out with friends, being bullied, loss and grief issue. These are all in the management plan. The only thing you have to be careful is you have to get permission from the parents to share some of this information. Not all information you share in your family world. Some are very private. Okay? But if there's value to share, then I'll ask for permission. I will say, I think there'll be value to share some of this information, especially to do with mom's maternal mental health and things like that. And moms are overwhelmed and stressed. Establish clarity on family structure, roles, expectation, boundary, and exclude learning difficulties. So if you're sure there's some form of learning difficulties, then you have to exclude, because school refusal is very complex. Just having learning difficulties may be one way of reducing school because of anxiety. Mobilize resources, access to school counselor, therapist availability. Next slide, please. Oh, I like to tell stories. You probably know by now I like to tell stories. And there are many students I work with who allowed me to use their stories to share with you today. And part of that is to allow you to see there's many ways to work with school refusal. Reframing school refusal is a stubborn and tricky problem. It's very sneaky, it'll sneak up on you. The use of language, school wobbly, worry germs. Who else has worry germs in the family? Use of metaphor, humor, and ritual. How do you bring it to a close? How do you have a ritual to bring it to a close? I find externalization technique from narrative therapy is very powerful. How do you externalize worry germs? Next. We talk about that. Amplify change. How do you amplify change? Talk about Amelia. Amelia did really well. So I wanted to surprise her. So I put together a certificate and give it to her. She refused to get out of her car for therapy. So I took the certificate and give it to her in a car. I said, you don't have to come. I'll talk to mom and dad. So it's a paradox. Don't try harder. So I don't try very hard. You don't come, I said, you wait. Then after my therapy session with the parents, I said to the father, will you send another message to your daughter who's waiting in the car that David have a second surprise for her? And I actually got a cake to celebrate her success of so many days at school. And she's ring back, what surprise? David said, you have to come up. And she came up and she got a birthday cake. Not a birthday cake, a cake to celebrate her success. And she took the cake home and she was beaming, you know. So how to help kids to save themselves from embarrassment, right? Timely relapse prevention work is very important. How would I know that things are going to go backwards in this family? So that's relapse prevention work, that's important. What would be the things that you notice that tells you that things might go backwards, okay, as part of termination? In Australia, you got timely use of the homeschool liaison officer. I know you don't have it here. And the youth police liaison officer that specializes in talking to young people that don't go to school because it's a legal issue, okay? So in my therapy room, I will invite the homeschool liaison officer and the youth police liaison for very entrenched school refusal, where I need to use the police. And they come in as a way of psychoeducation. Okay. Next. What you can learn from my failures. Next. Normalize and embrace failure, re-evaluate and assess the therapeutic process. You might have to do another reenactment to see where you go wrong, review the family dynamics, and maybe another home visits. Expand the system and intervene structurally. Failures equal opportunity for growth. So these are the things. So I learn from my failures. Next slide, please. I think continue to plant seeds of hope, because children with school refusal, like children with ADHD, are all entitled to happiness. Okay, I think that's my last slide. Is that right? Practice-based evidence says the therapist's responsiveness to the needs of the child, parent, and school system, and her ability to create a sense of urgency for timely intervention is critical, as well as the confidence of the family therapist. So if you want to do this work, you really need to learn a lot to build that confidence over time. And there's many different ways to work with them. Yeah, but some of the universal principles doesn't change. A good assessment is critical.